I'm really
Welcome,
nervous.
everybody. We have a wonderful research team that's going to give their presentation today. So hopefully all of you have signed in. We're going to get started with our first announcements. Austin, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we want to say congratulations to our CVP and or CPTC team for placing second in the Western Regional CPTC competition. I believe this is their second or third time placing second. I could be wrong. So I'm really happy to see them continue their success. If you don't know, our CPTC is the offensive security side of things for their competition, and it is a lot of fun. Definitely a team you should check out if you want to see how that goes and what happens in that competition. And then I'll
Also
let
in the
Amber.
spring, it's going to be the defensive competition.
Right, it's CCDC. Tryouts for that had already happened. So if you want to compete for either of these teams, you will have to wait until next school year. Other than that, I'll let Amber handle the rest of the announcements.
Cybersecurity Awareness Fair. It is this Thursday, the moment we've been waiting for. You can meet industry professionals, have your resumes ready for those who are already volunteering. Have your resumes ready because one of the greatest companies is going to be able to help us out with our resume building, and they'll go ahead and give you like a little Q&A trying to figure out what do you want to do, how to fix it, all that kind of stuff. So please do not miss out on this opportunity. Also, we'll be presenting our CSAF topic on AI facial recognition in TikTok and social media, as well as our intro to CTF led by Austin. Also, if you stop by, you can actually win some prizes. I have input at the Eventbrite, so please do register for this Thursday. Membership. Jackie, you want to talk about it real quick?
I do. So if you haven't paid your membership, please do so. If you're graduating in December, please DM me on Slack. And that is all. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our wonderful directors. Oh, never mind. I take it back.
Upcoming events. Sorry, Jackie.
Yeah, so again, NCL is not this upcoming weekend, it is next weekend. So it's following Halloween weekend. We will be announcing 3 different teams because we have so many members. So really grateful to all of y'all that are participating. We will have 2 teams that will be a little more for fun or learning NCL still, and then we'll have 1 team actually trying to be competitive in NCL and doing their very best to represent not only FAST but also Cal Poly Pomona as well, because it can be school based. So moving on to the next slides where we discuss professional organization events. Again, ISACA has a webinar on October 30th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And it's about improving your resume, which is actually really useful because CSAF is on Thursday. So please do, if you're going to attend CSAF for the job fair, touch up on your resume. There will be exciting companies, including CrowdStrike, which has a reputation of being a very good company to work for. And moving on to the next slide, there is a cyber conference that's going to be happening. This used to be the Texas Cyber Summit. It's now called Gray Hat Cyber Conference, and it will take place from Thursday to Saturday of this week, October 29th to October 31st, and it's from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. PDT. And there's so many workshops, villages, trainings, even OSINT for Blue Team. It has a lot packed into it. Really excited for it. It's also free. It doesn't give you full access to it, but free does give you access to all the workshops and things like that. And then now I am proud to present FAST's cybersecurity research team led by Samuel Raumin.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. Hi, how are you all today? I hope everyone is doing well. Can you guys all see the presentation well? There's no problems, no questions? Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, cool. All right. My name is Samuel Raumin. I am an engineer at Cal Poly Pomona, and I am your guys' director lead for cybersecurity. And I am very, very, very happy to announce our project, the Cyberdeck, and we'll kind of get into that right now. So I'm sure a lot of you probably are wondering what the term Cyberdeck is. What is a Cyberdeck? What's the idea behind our project? So when we were first kind of sitting down, imagine me and a bunch of other people sitting in a conference room, basically just trying to imagine what we wanted to propose as a project. And one of the things that we wanted to come up with was a tool. We wanted to work on something that would be useful for people to use in the field, right? As something that is very useful, and we didn't really have a clue as to what kind of tool we wanted to develop. But one thing for sure that we wanted was one that was a little bit more customizable, much like the very popular tools that are used by field professionals and just by anyone in cybersecurity in general. So that term, Cyberdeck, right? I'm sure maybe some of you have read Neuromancer before. It's by William Gibson. It's a very good read. But basically, he talks about the idea of cyberdecks. And this was back in the 80s when he wrote this book. So obviously, there was really no clear conception as to what mobile devices were. And really, only the birth of the internet had really only occurred about a year after that book was released. And it wasn't even publicly released. It was a military usage device. So obviously it was a pretty far-reached idea at the time that turned out to be something very similar to what we have now, right? What the way Gibson called it was the cyberspace, and I'm sure a lot of you can probably just constitute that as the internet, but we wanted to come up with something that was a little bit more grasping with the idea of a cyberdeck. In the book, a cyberdeck, each and every person has one, but they were a lot more customizable than like your typical stock iPhone or Android, because although you can customize a lot of the software, the hardware itself on Cyberdecks was also incredibly customizable and also reflective of the characters in the story. And that was something that, us as a group felt was just incredible and something that is a little bit harder to attain, but definitely something that's usable and also probably possible with the stuff that we have already developed now. So we wanted to answer the idea of a customizable tool that is usable for various situations while still performing constant across all of those situations, right? We want something that is reliable, flexible, and usable in all of these kinds of situations, right? Now, and then of course, it also touches on both hardware and software. So these were kind of the pictures, the ideas, things that we were kind of pulling from different points. And I kid you not, the first idea that I had when I was first thinking about, I'm going to kill that phone. I just ignore that for a moment. But the idea of the Cyberdeck for me first came from this picture, this image right here of Marcus from the game Watch Dogs 2. It was a very short scene, but I remembered it because I had actually played the game a week earlier. So I remembered that there was this one device that he literally just lodged into a USB slot. And all of a sudden he was able to have a full terminal window that was open with his own environment that allowed him to interact with the system that was interfacing on, but it also didn't have to be. Right. Then I started looking at tinier computer systems. These, the poker chip is basically for scale, but it's talking about different kinds of computer systems, such as like the Zodiac tiny mini PCs or 2 Raspberry Pis that have both a proximity sensor installed on one and then a full on actually cooler on the bottom side. Thank you, Max. Now, the final thing that we wanted to look at was by a YouTuber that I'm actually incredibly familiar with, named Node. I highly suggest you guys look at him if you haven't already. But he was working on a project that was called the Zero Terminal. And this device, that little device on the bottom there, that little phone-looking device, was completely made by him. It's a full project that is kind of trying to attain the same thing, just a little bit more customizability, and it also has a screen on it with like a bunch of modules you can attach. But it's a really cool project, and I highly suggest any of you look at it. So this is actually where we got most of our inspiration for this project. Now, there was a couple notes, right? For the final product, we wanted to make it so that it was similar to Marcus's build. We didn't want a screen. We wanted it to be able to interact with wherever, any kind of computer system that is thrown at it, right? so most likely Windows. You have a small form factor, a stable cable interface that was shown in the game, somewhat sleek and usable, and also has the possibility for upgrades and then optional module dependability. So it meaning that you can attach things to a GPIO port. That's your first hint of where we were probably thinking of going. Efficiency is key when it comes to this device. So hardware management and software management is key for making these kinds of systems. We wanted it so that it was pretty flush, very little bugs. If bugs happen, they happen, right? But we still wanted it, at least for our task, to be able to work, a good amount of the time, right? So it has a dependability that is solid. We wanted it to be open source. So obviously we wanted it so that if anybody wanted to recreate this device, they can. Right. So that's just the idea. So a low barrier of entry to become a user. And then for that barrier to exist, we also needed it to be affordable. So maybe using pre-existing hardware that is known within the community is something that is important. And of course, I included a little hint there as well. All right. So what would you need? Well, with our finalized project, you would realistically need just a Raspberry Pi and a USB cable at the minimum. That's what you would need in order to have, and then of course the properly flashed software. That's what you would need at the minimum to make this system work exactly how we wanted it to. Now the question is it possible? Well, yes, it is, right? It's incredibly possible. The thing is that we came up with a specialized kind of attack vector that utilizes not the command prompt of Windows, because SSH is not enabled by default on the command prompt. So we decided to use something a little bit more familiar, PowerShell. PowerShell is our main entrance to making it so that we can SSH directly via what we call ETH USB. It's basically just an Ethernet connection that's done over the USB serial port. So the idea is that you plug in the Pi, it boots up, it runs a profile that has what we call an HID ducky script. If any of you know what a rubber ducky is, that's exactly what this is doing. It's basically simulating an HID input or a human interface, human interface device. So any kind of like keyboard or mouse uses that kind of protocol. It's standard, it's universal. Every device that has a USB input is going to support HID, right? It's a standard method for USB communication. So obviously there is some encoding that has to be done in order to do that. That's what the ducky script does, okay? So once you plug in the USB, at the same time as you plug it in, it's powering up the Pi. And then what the Pi begins to do is it says, okay, I notice that the first thing I need to do on the profile is to create an HID signal and punch in this string of codes that I defined inside of the profile, right? So ducky script. And we will be talking about this more in the workshop. Now, like I said before, we need some way to actually interact with the Pi. What's really cool about this piece of software that we found is that even though there is an HID process, it's covert, meaning that there is still the USB Ethernet connection that still exists, even though it is connected as a keyboard device. And that's really cool and kind of hard to attain. So believe me when I say that the software that we found does this incredibly well. And I must admit that I am very impressed of the way that the code works. And again, we will be talking more about that in the workshop. So PowerShell basically just accepts an SSH input, right? There's no pre-existing installation that needs to be installed on that system. In fact, I tried it on a brand new system. There was nothing on it, right? Basically just completely updated, but there was no additional software added, no Bonjour, no nothing. And it was able to successfully open PowerShell and deploy the code so that then the SSH vector is allowed to connect back to the Raspberry Pi Linux environment, so that then now you have a workable console that has everything. It's pretty much Kali Linux on that system. So you have a full usable hacking box with you that is powered by the same USB connection that connects you to that interface. It's very simple, but it's really cool, right? with that, there's a bunch of really cool things that can be noted about this. Since PowerShell runs in memory, right? None of this stuff is traceable. Once the program is closed, and unless the session is the same thing, if the computer restarts, nothing is written to disk unless specified, right? That is huge. Unless there's like some kind of PowerShell logs that are occurring, which I don't believe there is, you won't have any sort of traceability whether or not you plugged in that device or not, right? Beyond just USB plugs. And to the computer, it just looks like another USB. So what's one person going to look when looking over the forensics of this system? They will only see that there was a USB connected, but realistically, they'll have nothing else to know about it. It could be any old USB. So that's kind of something to, that's obviously a little bit more on the malicious side of things, but of course, this is something that is usable. Now, this is my setup. This was when I was first kind of getting it started. What's really interesting is that this software simulates a user environment that you can connect to either via the USB, Bluetooth, or Wi-Fi. You can kind of choose. Now, I did state explicitly that we will be using Raspberry Pi 4s for this, but since I did not have one lying around to use, I had to use a 0. But that's okay, because the 0 was still able to simulate practically everything that the 4 is going to be able to do. Okay, so this is just the main opening. This is just defaults, right? You know, what you see on that screen. But again, we will be going over more of this in the video so that we can change, or in the workshop so that we can change defaults and make it a little bit more of a safer system to use, right? So right here is actually the video. This was the first time that I actually got the system working. And you're just going to have to take my word for it that I did plug it in and I'm not typing it, because you will hear me typing at the end of the video. So here we go. So as of right now, I'm plugging in the device and simulating it. And there you go. And that's me typing in absolute excitement, because I was able to successfully make it so that with the code that we created in the team, we were able to make it so that the system gives you a full Linux environment in just seconds after you plug in the system. That is fantastic. That is exactly what we wanted, right? And that's great. That is perfect. Okay. Now, the thing is that you can also manage the Ducky code to make it not sign into root. If some of you noticed that, we can make it sign into separate users, right? But this means that since this vector works and it is possible on every kind of system, you can create a deployable system that works on every single kind of Windows 10 device, period, right? If they are updated, right? And that's obviously going to be the case in most places that you are, right? So if I go to the next slide here. So the software works. What now? Well, the idea is that we can create these systems that are a lot more hardware customizable, right? So they may have the things that I stated before. They may have like a full-on cooling block with a fan on it for, better processor loading. You can give it a really nice metallic, sleek, or plastic design from a 3D printer, or you can even laser engrave it and metal bend it if you really want to. The possibilities are endless, because the thing is that since we used a device that is so well known in the community, there's already a pre-existing just tons of files and data and information that you can pull from to make your own customizable Cyberdeck. Make it your own, right? So like I said before, you can make what we have on the left here is a 3D printed design with a full little, I believe that's a 20 millimeter fan that's hooked up to the power slots. There's a power pin out actually on the Raspberry Pi. You literally just plug that sucker in, and then it's off to the races. You have your full Linux environment just ready with you, and you can stuff that thing. It's not too much bigger than my phone, right? I mean, thickness wise. So it's like something you can definitely take with you or throw in your backpack along with your USB-C or USB-B cable. And then, of course, there's also another example here on the left. This one, or on the right, this one is from Adafruit. It has a 2-fan configuration with a much more beefy heat sink, it looks like. And still, you could cover the bottom plate to make sure there's no shorting on the bottom. You can do all sorts of really cool stuff, because the thing is that there's so many different kinds of community assets that allow you to either create your own or pull your own and modify it, right? So at my workshop, I'm going to be talking more over what this is. I don't have a whole lot to say more beyond this, because the thing is that the workshop realistically is going to be covering the profile setup. It's going to be setting up the idea of creating the pie. It's going to be making it so that you have something that is totally usable, right? I made this presentation kind of short because I wanted to be able to answer more questions. I knew that there was going to be a lot of questions regarding this in terms of the workshop, and I wanted to be able to answer them really before the workshop began, right? And I think it'd be actually kind of something fun to build over quarantine. It's really cheap to build these systems. Like I said, when we were initially aiming for the project, we wanted to make this thing as affordable as possible. And Fast is willing, even if you can't afford it, Fast is definitely willing to help me get you something so that you can use it, right? And then if not, I can always help you as well, right? So we really are incredibly excited to share this information with you guys on how to do it. We will be posting a full documentation after the workshop. So if you can't make it to the workshop, I will be recording it at the workshop, as well as typing up a proper documentation instruction set that you can be able to look at so that you can properly design and build your own Cyberdeck, right? And with that, I say thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the work that my team did for all the stuff that we did for this project. It was a lot of work, because the thing is that we basically went over just a lot of different hiccups. Some of the hiccups that we ran into were definitely dealing with the command prompt and trying to find proper, but it was right when we kind of found the attack vector, everything fit. I mean, there was really nothing else that we had to install. I mean, it's a pretty easy thing to set up. Because the software, I already created a pre-flash software set that you will be able to just flash directly to your Raspberry Pi's SD card, and then you guys can go off to the races and you'll have this customizable tool to use. So I'm sorry if this is so short, but this was pretty much what this is what we came up with. Is anyone there? Yes, no? Maybe so?
Yes, we're still here. Actually, I do have a question for you, Sam.
Sure, let's hear it.
With the SD cards, is it one operating system per SD card, or?
No, of course not. You can set up EFI on the Raspberry Pi to make it so that it has like a dual boot. You just have to properly partition the SD card when flashing. That's kind of weird, because honestly, flashing to partition, so you'd have to pre-create the partition, and then you'd have to basically say in whatever device you're flashing the partition to, or flashing the file size to, you need to specify, okay, use this partition and don't touch this other one. And then you have to do the same for the other software that or OS of choice that you want to flash. And then you have to do it. I really don't know how well SD cards handle partitions. I think for like dual booting and that kind of stuff, it's perfectly fine. But you would just have to basically tell the Raspberry Pi at the EFI level that you wanted to boot into either or, right? And then, of course, you can always have the Raspberry Pi ask for an EFI input before you begin. And I do know there is a way to do that as well. So that's how I would probably answer that. Is there any more questions?
If there isn't, I have a couple.
Sure, let's hear it.
So out of curiosity, the PowerShell, is it version dependent? And number two, is the PowerShell, does the security settings have to be configured in certain means or ways to allow it for it to execute? Or can the PowerShell security settings be set maximum and it will still engage and work properly?
So that's a really good question, Josh. So the thing is that it is version dependent, but the thing is that the version dependency doesn't really matter, because in reality, PowerShell has always had SSH on board for a really long time. So yes and no. There are some things that, the reason I say version dependency is because Ducky code has changed over the years. So like initially when we were first working with original Ducky script stuff, what was happening was the delay command of all things inside the Ducky script was causing Office 365 to open, of all things, right? Just an incredibly odd, the hex just was out of date and nothing was working, right? But the new improvised Ducky code works really well from what we tested on new Windows 10 systems. We did try 2004, and we also tried the one before 2004. I think it was like 19 something. I can't honestly remember. I can't remember the versioning of Windows that we tried it on the other one, but they both worked. In terms of security settings, well, that really depends on the operating system of the server that you're running on. Most systems that I have ever had interacted with, and I'm trying to say this as unmaliciously as possible, had PowerShell as an executable command. Like you could open PowerShell with no administrative rights or no nothing like that. Even as a standard user, you can open PowerShell. And SSH, by definition, is not an incredibly security-oriented command. To the computer, SSH doesn't really look any different than just connecting to another computer, right? So in terms of like running commands in Windows and that kind of stuff, SSH is definitely not going to pull any red flags on PowerShell compared to other sorts of attack vectors that are possible. But no, that's a very good set of questions. Most of that, we're hoping for the fact that when you connect to these Windows systems, that they have PowerShell open on the user that you're running it as, right? It would be kind of, how should I say, you start to kind of enter weird legal territory when you exploit something on Windows to open PowerShell without your proper credentials, right? I mean, so it is possible, but like I said, you start to kind of enter, I can't necessarily tell you how to do that because that's not legal. But I can tell you that for the most part, most people will allow you so that the system will open PowerShell and you will be perfectly fine. Is there any more questions at all? Oh, okay. Josh, are you new here? I don't think I've ever seen you around before.
Oh, yes, you have seen me, Samuel. You know me better as Professor Chin.
Oh, hi, Professor Chin. How are you? You sounded very familiar. That's what I thought. Does anyone else have any more questions at all? I'm seriously free. I know this is a really short one, guys. So I didn't want to take up a ton of your time.
Hey, Sam. So you would be running Kali on whatever machine you hooked that box up to, like that would pop up?
No, it would be in a Windows environment, and we are going to be making it so that it will work with Macintosh and Linux environments as well, like as the interface. But the interface that you're going to be connecting to via the USB connection line is going to be ran through the Raspberry Pi, and that is a Kali Linux environment. So the Pi itself is running Kali Linux, and that's what you're interacting with. But in terms of the system, in what it is running when you connect it, we want to make it so it's basically unbiased. It'll be able to execute itself either via a Linux operating system, a Macintosh operating system, or a Windows operating system. But right now we have the Windows operating system running. But from what I understand, since the command prompt on both Macintosh and Linux support SSH natively, that one's probably going to be a lot easier to do.
Very cool. Thank you.
You bet. Now, the biggest thing for that is basically trying to tell the Pi what kind of system it's connected to, because obviously it's going to be a different command set when it's connected via, because there's no such thing as PowerShell in Macintosh or in Linux, right? So it's like it's just going to be like, okay, why is it running all this crap that obviously isn't going to do it? So it's going to be different ducky code across each one of the operating systems. So we have to tell the Pi somehow, and I do have a plan on how to do that, to make it so that it will be able to recognize the operating system that it is connected to, and then from there, connect up. Is there any more questions? Will, do you have anything to add? No, I think if you're there.
I don't think I have anything to add.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun working with my team. My team was awesome. They were super supportive, and they came up with a lot of different kinds of stuff, like ideas and questions and concerns when we were building this whole thing. They were stellar in the ultimate progress of the team. I'm very happy with how well all of them work together. So I just wanted to additionally thank everybody who is on the team who is here, because you guys did a very, very, very good job, and I am incredibly impressed.
What was one of the questions that stood out to you by one of your team members?
Impressive call. I mean, they all did impressive stuff. You know, they all did things that were like impressive questions. One of the questions I received was that I was incredibly impressed with was dealing with the idea of what kind of attack vector we were going to propose. And all of them all of a sudden kind of started throwing me stuff like commands that we could use to run in the terminal to somehow do an install of some kind of SSH, or to open SSH somehow through the command prompt and all that kind of stuff. But eventually there was one who basically suggested the usage of PowerShell. And I was like, so I'd like hopped on a PowerShell terminal and I tried SSH just natively just to see if it would open, and it would. So I was incredibly impressed with those kinds of comments, questions. There was a lot of different ones like that. I was particularly impressed with one of the users who did write-ups on every meeting that we had. So I was able to actually keep people up to speed with those documents when people asked. That was really, really, really cool. A lot of very passionate people who were incredibly supportive of the whole process. Even the ones who didn't quite have a handle on the situation, or really didn't know entirely what was going on, they weren't shy to ask what was going on. They were incredibly intelligent in the way they perceived and asked questions. And overall, I was just incredibly pleased with how well they performed. So especially during right now, I mean, that it's just, it's different times right now. So obviously I am impressed with how those people handled themselves. So that would be, does anyone else have any questions at all? Comments, concerns?
Actually, I have a question for one of your team members, whoever is willing to answer this question.
Sure.
What was your guys' experience learning from this subject?
I know there's two of them in here because two of them wrote in chat. So I'm going to either hold either one of you accountable.
Sam, I think you have more than 2 members here, my friend.
No, I mean two of my, yeah, well, I know, I'm just seeing, I haven't looked at I'm such a boomer when it comes to Zoom. I just do not know how to use the software.
Call upon a member?
Guys, I'm not going to force you guys. If you hate me, hate me. But the thing is that yes, no, of course I will be recording it. Oh, someone wrote in the chat.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, these guys had great questions. I mean, like I was absolutely floored with how well they were able to, because some of them, I was just thinking like, this is just not going to work as well, right? Because it's online. It's, I'm not, it's everybody's kind of getting used to just using Zoom, like me, who's just an absolute boomer. And then it's like, kind of just, and I didn't want to hold these guys to super high expectations, but they blew it. Even they blew the top off based on just the expectations I originally was going to have if we were in person. So I was, like I said, I was incredibly impressed. Is any more questions at all? I kind of understand what it's like to be a teacher now when none of the students are talking. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like I have to feel kind of bad for teachers sometimes because of that, because I know I'm one of those students who just does not talk.
It's a little nerve-wracking. However, this is why we appreciate them, because some of us may not be able to ask questions, but some of them are a little afraid of asking questions because they don't want to make it seem like they're uneducated about a certain subject. But this is why we appreciate our professors by asking them questions, because
Sure.
they will answer.
Yeah, and I will. I'm the professor here right now. So if any of you guys want to have any questions, please ask them. I will 100% answer them to the fullest of my capabilities. And I will not think of you as stupid, because to be honest with you, I was thought of myself as probably the dumbest one for some of the things that I tried to do on this stupid little thing, right? So I definitely understand the limitations of this system, right? I mean, it's definitely the $10 I spent sometimes. So Sam did an amazing job as a beginner newbie to all of this from the beginning. No, I know everyone is so incredibly busy too. I mean, I had a midterm actually 10 minutes after, before this. So I understand how painful it has been online for everyone. So, because I have my own basis to consider.
Sounds good. Is there any more questions, comments, concerns, anything regarding to this topic before we let everybody go?
If not, I do have one more thing to say. Please do your ballots. They need to be turned in and due November 3rd. They need to be dated by November 3rd for them to be counted as a vote. So please do your ballots, I don't know if we're doing it in person in California. I could be mistaken, but I'm doing mail-in ballot.
You can take
everyone
them
else
in.
should too.
You can take them into like the offices as well. Like any kind of office that has the ballot boxes, they take them.
Yeah,
You
so
can
don't
also
forget to
go. You can also go to any polling center and just hand it off to one of the docents as well.
Right.
Just complete it at home, sign it, and then just hand it over to someone. At
It
the
has to
polling
be
center,
dated
all
the
five
day
of them.
you turn it in. That's also another thing that's important.
It needs to be, or if you're mailing it in, it needs to be posted the day you're turning it in.
Right.
So again,
Also, if you're
please
within
do
the
vote.
vicinity of the Staples Center is hosting polling in person. So,
Right.
little FYI.
And for everyone that's in Orange County, please do be safe
Yes.
with everything that is happening down there.
These fires are knocking out power everywhere. I've had to help 3 different people with breaker cuts because of just poor power management. Please be careful. I know it's. Me and my homies don't like fires.
All right.
So please, everyone, do be safe and go out and vote.
Yep.
Yeah, and for those of you in live in the Orange County area, take care of yourselves too.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for coming to today's meeting. Please come check us out at the Cybersecurity Awareness Fair, as well as this Friday for the Cybersecurity Research Workshop. We'll be looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you.
Take it easy, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys.